We made it happen. Jimmy was an incredible success. I don't know where he is. I gotta find him. Gosh, I don't. Oh.
Oh yeah, George. Oh, George.
Right
George.
here. Yeah.
We did it, brother.
Yes, we
hey,
did.
Thanks to Dan. You know what? And in the ring with Dan and Benny. Hey, brother, man, hey, he's about the most cat. I just love him to death. I love you. Thanks for having me. Hey, you're the best. I'm telling you, brother. In the ring with
Dan and Benny.
Yeah.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Dan.
Mwah.
Oh yeah.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Spasciano, joined as always by the original Long Island Iced Bee himself, Benny Scala. Benny, first weekend of football season. I see your background there. I can't imagine you're too happy. So other than that, how you doing?
Well, Dan, we're on episode number 142. Very special number for me as I spent my formative years growing up at 142 Intervale Avenue, Farmdale, Long Island. And the number 142 also represents how many recent turndowns I've had from women. But no, I would say I have three words: Jets. Although who's going to be their quarterback?
It was a rough start. It was a rough start. Well, Benny, we could, as we've seen from our baseball and football discussions, we could talk all kinds of sports, but we are going to talk wrestling today. And we wanted to bring some friends on because this is kind of a fun topic, and it's been real big and a lot of people talking about a lot of stories. So, I mean, really, I don't think they need any introduction, but we're going to give them to it anyway because I feel they've deserved it. Why don't you tell everybody who these fine mugs joining us are?
Absolutely. So tonight's show is a little bit different than our norm. The entire wrestling world is abuzz with the recent brouhaha and subsequent firing of one Phillip Brooks, aka CM Punk. And this has created quite the controversy in the wrestling community. And the lines have been pretty much drawn in the sand. And so to help us chat about that, we have, and you introduced me as the original Long Island Ice Bee, but our guests are really Long Island's favorite sons, Monty and the Pharaoh. Gentlemen, welcome to Dan and Benny in the Ring.
Well, thank you. Thank you, guys. I want to correct Dan. I want to correct Dan on one thing. We're not friends. We're family, right? You guys have joined the Monty and the Pharaoh network.
We are family.
We are family. I love your guys' weekly show. It's incredible. Every interview, I can't speak highly enough. And again, we're family, right? You joined up with us, and we're honored to have you guys on, and we're honored to be on your show tonight. So thanks a lot, guys.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate it. It's high praise. Even though if we are a family, I'm the normal one, and you're the three uncles I have to warn my girlfriend about before I bring her over to Thanksgiving. So
I'm the relative they keep in the basement. They throw down some chopped meat about once every 2 weeks.
What am I, the relative you visit at the psych center once a month? What is this? Right.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I mean, obviously, Benny hit it on the head. It's been all over the airwaves. Several broadcasters, some of the shows and articles have pointed out that it's really getting more traffic, than even some of the actual wrestling that's been happening. And it's unfortunate. You have AEW has the largest, biggest pay-per-view in company history, and nobody's talking about the success of the show. Nobody's talking about the show itself. They're talking about the backstage stuff. They're talking about the fallout. So first things first, we got to go, before we can get to the current, we want to start in the past. Obviously, they had the original All In, the challenge to show that the wrestlers wanted to show that somebody besides WWE and then previously WCW, none of the big names, somebody independent could sell out an arena. They did. That led to the creation of AEW, January 2019. Tony Khan starts to create it. He hires the first people he brings in the doors are Nick and Matt Jackson, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Cody Rhodes, who are all made executive vice presidents. So, Mike, I'll start with you first. Was that mistake number one, having active wrestlers in an executive VP role?
I think the reality of it is today's generation, and they are today's generation, right? they they'll they've shown that they cannot be leaders. It's just not that group. It's pretty much that generation. So unless you have someone to corral this type of this group or this young group, yeah, it's a mistake. You need one leader, and it has to be an older statesman or someone that's at least could represent. So yeah, it was a mistake. You could clearly see what happened with CM Punk. We could actually call CM Punk an older statesman at this point, and he drew no respect from anyone in that locker room, and I think that's what led to this. So yeah, Dan, big mistake.
Farrah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think one of the biggest problems, of course, not only did Tony Khan include those guys you mentioned, but they're also currently wrestling, like in the prime of their careers. When Mike says elder statesman, I don't think it's necessarily an ex-wrestler that makes a poor leader, because look at Triple H. He's not currently wrestling, and he does a good job of keeping that locker room together, keeping the scripts tight, keeping the show going. So I think it was compounded even more so by having current wrestlers be on the board. What are you doing? You are really asking for a problem, if you know what I'm getting at. If Mike and I have talked about it 1,000 times. If they had brought in guys from the past who are retired and are good, fine booking minds, that would have worked. But instead, Tony, got in bed with guys who are on the card, for God's sakes. That's a problem.
And if I could add one more thing to Farrow's point is, I don't think Tony Khan was respected in the industry. He might have been a rich guy, and I feel that they just never respected him. And I think there was no fear there. If it didn't work out and they ran AEW for a year and it finally folded, all those guys had made more money than they had ever dreamed of. So there was no fear behind this. There's no fear of losing your job. There's no, it doesn't matter. I've made all this money. I've made myself rich enough that I can do signings at $3,000, $4,000 a clip. And I can go on Twitch and play video games and make myself another, subsidized income of another $50,000 to $100,000 a year just because I wrestled for AEW for 1 year. So, yeah.
Well, Mike, I want to have you quickly expand on something you pointed out. You talked about the respect in the locker room. We're going to get to the incident in question. One of the aggrieved parties was Jack Perry. He is one of several AEW talents, Jack Perry included, Adam Page being another high-profile one, who have publicly stated not just that they refuse to follow guidance, but almost an anger and offense to these old timers want to come in and tell me how to wrestle. I'm 25. I know, I don't want to hear what Billy Gunn and Arn Anderson and Jerry Lynn, and I don't want to hear what some of these guys have to say. And I wanted your thoughts on that. When you have Dean Malenko, you have Arn Anderson, you have Billy Gunn, you have Jim Ross, and the list is keeps going. Obviously, someone recently like an Ace Steel and Jerry Lynn I mentioned. You have hundreds and hundreds of years. Tully Blanchard's another one. Hundreds of years of experience in the locker room, and wrestlers who openly, I'm good. I've trained for 6 months with my friend in his backyard. I don't need anything from you. Is that a generational thing like you were talking about, or is that specific to maybe some of the talents?
I think it's partially a generational thing, but I'd also say this. It doesn't matter all that you've named these legends, right? And all the experience that they have. If the true head of the snake doesn't support that group and he listens to a Jack Perry or, Young Bucks, and he gives them more weight than a Tully Blanchard, you lose all that control. As much as people bash Vince McMahon, and I know you guys aren't huge fans of Vince McMahon, I, however, am. He learned and he watched his father get worked, who was very, who was a legit guy who was highly respected. Absolutely. But he had the years of watching these wrestlers work his father. And by the time he was ready to be in control, he was in control. And he controlled it with money, and he controlled it with power. And the sergeants that ran his business for him, like a Tony Garea and or Jay Strongbow and or Pat Patterson, If you screwed with them, you were gone, right? I mean, there may be a few people that could get away with it, a Hulk Hogan, a Shawn Michaels, but overall, Vince was always in charge. So even though you have all that talent they could have weighed on, they had no power because Tony didn't give that to them. Now, again, I'm not in that locker room, but it's clear to me that that's what was going on. When with Paige going on and discussing that he won't take any advice from older wrestlers because he got trained somewhere else. I mean, right there, that guy should have been squashed. He was a nobody. You could make a real statement with a guy that was nobody, right? You could squash them. And then that sends a message to that locker room that goes, I'm not good enough or I'm not big enough to work for the WWE, so I better step in line and step in fetch and collect my paycheck and do what this guy's got to say. Again, I'm not in the locker room, but that's just my opinion.
What do you think, Benny?
I'm going to add that, and no, I'm not a big fan of Vince McMahon, but when it comes to leadership, I'm taking Vince McMahon over Tony Khan every day of the week and 3 times on Sunday, because we wouldn't even be talking about this in WWE because it never would have happened. My next question is that AEW recruited a ton of WWE talent: Jericho, Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, Matt Hardy, Christian, Daniel Bryan, etc. And maybe it doesn't even matter, but I've never heard anything mentioned as far as are these guys even making money or not? And so that would do you think they're making money, and does it really even matter given the fact that the guy's a billionaire?
Jimmy, you answering that?
Sure, why not? Do I think they're making money? Yeah, I don't think they're doing it to lose any money. But I really find it very funny because my bigger point in this whole thing is all those guys you mentioned, all those guys with WWE resumes, a lot of them are absolute legends. Where is their leadership while this locker room is fragmenting? Who is leading that locker room? I've said it before. Where is the Undertaker type guy to report to? Because if you pull any shit, he might twist you into bookends. Where is I thought Daniel Bryan's supposed to be a great leader. I thought Chris Jericho was supposed to be this great locker room leader. And, Punk did not have the respect of no one in the locker room. Punk had the respect of half the locker room. That's why they had the shows. That's why they had the shows subdivided. Yeah. I'm sorry?
No, Punk was trying to be that leader. Punk was trying to be the Undertaker.
Yeah, but it wasn't gonna, and it wasn't gonna happen because, like Mike said, there are certain guys who are not going to respect CM Punk. It's not even if you don't respect the Undertaker, you're probably going to keep your mouth shut, if you understand what I'm getting at.
Well, no, and I think part of the problem, it goes back to Tony Khan because he hired a bunch of kids and made them EVPs, and these guys are running the show.
Right. And let me tell you something. It's that very panel itself that drove Cody Rhodes the hell out of there. He was like, you know something? The inmates are running the asylum. I'm going home, and I'm going to WrestleMania main event, and I'm going to go back to work for Vince, who employed my father for decades. That's where I'm going. Right. And it was the best move Cody could have made. And Cody is a super stud and the biggest face in the biggest company in the world now. Good move, Cody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was actually at Raw last night. They were here in Norfolk. Thank you.
Nice.
Quick shout out to George Pontus, friend of the show, former guest. He got me the tickets. We went, and I didn't realize until later on that was the last ever McMahon run show because the Endeavor deal took place today. But the Scope Dome, Coliseum, Cody's reaction. I mean, that's Ricky Morton, Hogan levels of pop that he was getting in today's era of wrestling. But
he's beloved. He's beloved. He really is. Yeah. He's the perfect face, quite honestly. Absolutely. I really feel like he's the best, most. Mike, can I say this word? He's the best, most wholesome face I've seen since Backlund, for God's sakes. This is crazy to me. Good face. Really good face.
Here's the thing, and I think we spoke about this before too. So Cody has won me over also, and I was not a fan, as you know.
Correct.
My fear is sustainability. We know how this is going to end, right? We know that he will win the title. Then the question is, does this become sustainable
Well, I don't think Mike. I don't think he needs to hold it that long. Honestly, he's over, right? He's over no matter what. Even if he attains finally the final dream, which he should. What's wrong with like a 2-month reign and then the next villain takes over and he chases again for the next whatever? I think that it would be fine. He doesn't need to sustain. He needs to accomplish and keep the product relevant and keep his character relevant even after he drops the belt. It's not even that important that he holds it forever. Not in my mind.
I think that's a really good point, Jimmy. But here's the issue that I always think about: when you put that strap, right, mean that they're a media sensation, right? Because that's what they are. You need someone that can go on late night shows with the belt.
Oh, he can. And he's good at it. I mean, I've seen him. He goes in the suit. He's great.
Cody can. But here's my worry.
He can.
He loses the belt, and then you put it on a Gunther, which, by the way, Gunther's awesome. Totally get it.
Right.
You put it on anybody else. Who else in that company can you see carry that belt other than Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes? Not Seth Rollins.
Right. Well, that's how Vince looks at things. That's how Vince looks at stuff. You're right. Outside of Roman Reigns, I hate to say this. Danny's going to reach right through the set and crack me in the head when I say this. But a guy like Logan Paul would be amazing on the talk shows with the belt. I'm sorry. Don't hit me. But I really think Logan Paul's got the goods. He's an amazing wrestler. I wouldn't think that would harm the company at all if he was champion for a while as a bad guy. He'd be great.
Yeah, and he could keep the persona on the talk shows being that arrogant, cocky social media D-bag.
Absolutely.
And it would still fit. You could one of the legit heels that keeps kayfabe as much as much as Roman Reigns has won me over because I was one of his stauncher critics. Watching him go on the Tonight Show and smile and wave, and then next week he's beating the hell out of one of his family members because they stubbed his toe. Like, it's hard to keep that heel heat. Logan Paul can do that on the shows. I'll agree with you on that one.
Right. But Mike's got a good point. There's only a few that you could really do that with. That's why we had a John Cena, for God's sakes.
Right.
Well,
that's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was saying that's been the biggest criticism. We talked about it when we were on your show. That's been the biggest criticism of the WWE for 15 years now. That Vince, once Austin left, Vince said, "I'm never again going to have a star bigger than the company." And because of that mentality, you don't have, outside of a Brock Lesnar, outside of a Cody, you don't have somebody that, you look at the rosters now, I count on one hand the number of people that are legitimate heavyweight talk show, build WrestleMania around champions. And 15 years ago, there was a dozen of them. It's
right. But you can see, though, but history is now showing, because what do we start off the program with? What was the subject? Letting the inmates run the locker room. Vince is a genius. He was right to do this after Austin. He was right to do it. He had to. He had to maintain control. And as you can see, Vince is always ahead of the curve. Social media is out of control. Everybody's got an opinion. You know what opinions are like, don't you?
Yeah.
Vince was smart. He saw ahead of the curve and put a clamp on that crap and gave us John Cena. And oddly enough, John Cena might have very well become a bigger star than the company, but he did it outside the company through the stardom given to him in the company. Brilliant.
And by the way, he always towed the company line, right? He respected the company. He respected what it did for him.
Yep.
And that's the other thing too. I think we're gonna, if we're lucky, all of us are lucky enough to, and I mean it in the best of ways, lucky enough to live to see Vince McMahon pass, and we see that day come. I think at some point, everybody's going to realize what, I love both you guys, your family, but, again, we disagree on some stuff. We agree. I think I've heard Benny say, Vince kind of ruined wrestling, right? He took it out of we don't call it the big old halls, but he took it out of the regions and what he did to it.
Yeah.
But I think Vince, personally, if it wasn't for him, wrestling might have died, honestly.
It's possible
when the 90s got weak, right? There was a point we all weren't watching in the 90s, I think, at some point or another. And it's like, would regional wrestling have lasted at that point, being as bad as? I don't know. But
we don't know.
Again, back to leadership. I'm not saying Tony Khan's not a smart businessman. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve what he has, but he certainly doesn't come across as a leader. And on top of that, with a guy with that kind of money, I would think you would hire a professional writer to speak for you every time you're on air, because that guy, he sounds weak. His presentation is weak. When you watch him, you go, this guy's a pussy. Like,
right.
you know, you're like, this guy is
Thank
not a
you.
man. Like,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Like,
So Jimmy's having a fit.
it's messed up.
Pharaoh doing his
Pharaoh doing his,
what was
freeze
it?
connection.
What is Tourette syndrome imitation?
Well, I was trying to think of Max Headroom.
I mean,
My Tourette syndrome impatient? What the fuck?
Yeah,
You chopped out for a second there.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
funny.
I had no idea. Sorry. Anyway, Tourette syndrome over.
Let me ask you a question. When you guys look at wrestling throughout your life, right? You've been watching it since you're teenagers or whatever. What was the most important event that you remember that when you think about it, it just makes you feel good when it just comes to wrestling? Forget about anything else. What was it? Was it a vignette? Was it a match? What was it?
Well, for me, I mean, Vince Sr. was very formulaic, and I guess, to some extent, Vince Jr. Copied the same thing. But, you had Bruno, and you had Bruno against the heel who came in, and he usually went through either, was it Tony Parisi or Dominic DeNucci, maybe, attacked Arnie Skolin. And that was the big build-up to the match at the Garden. And a lot of these guys, I mean, at least me as a youngster, when I think of George Steele, actually the first match I ever went to was at the Island Garden in West Hempstead, April 1968. I don't know if that place is even still there or what it's used for now, but it was Bruno and Tanaka. And I mean, I literally had my heart in my throat, wondering if Tanaka was going to be the guy, because, there was a big build-up with Tanaka. I mean, kind of a long time ago, and people don't really remember that, but he was a really, an over heel, and I thought, man, I might watch him lose. Bruno loses his title, and Bruno won. I'll never forget. They started running the ropes, and they collided, and it sounded like an earthquake. I mean, the entire arena shook. They must have really hit each other hard, but Bruno got up at the count of 10, and I just remember this huge feeling of elation, and I left the arena happy. It's like, okay, Bruno, he's still the champion. But, I mean, for me, it was life and death.
Yeah, I can respect that. I think mine, and I know it's cliche almost, but when I was growing up watching wrestling, they were sports stars, and I mean, like, not that it was real thing, but I mean, yeah, you had your Hulk Hogan's and people like that, but they were Nolan Ryan, Joe Montana, Cal Ripken. That era of, like, these guys are great, but no one ever really felt better than a bigger, big star. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, that just, they didn't break that echelon until WrestleMania 3. Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant was the first time I ever watched a wrestler, and he felt like a real life superhero. And I was hooked before then, but I mean, I've been hooked ever since. And that was a McMahon thing. And I think you give credit where credit is due. Benny and I have been very critical of the modern product, but Vince McMahon just cashed a check for 6,000 times more than he bought the WWE for.
Wow.
So you can't argue with productivity. I mean, even with the product maybe not being as fond as we remember, nostalgia goggles and whatnot, he did something right. But Benny, we've been a money guy. We both money guys. We talk about it a lot. You mentioned something about management. What were you thinking there?
Well, I wanted to talk about Punk for a second. So several of us have been in management positions, and I bet every single one of us has had that one highly outspoken individual, the one that's really critical of both his coworkers and management. But at the same time, he takes an enormous amount of pride in his work, and he's a star. He's the top performer. I mean, shouldn't that, like in the case of Punk, does he get some extra slack for that?
Can I start this one off?
Yeah,
Go for it.
As an employee, no matter what it is, right? No matter what you're doing, there's a package, right? And you could be really great at your job, but you could be an asshole, right? Or you could come to work on time every day, but you get nothing done. My point is, you have to be the complete pizza, right? If you're not, you could be a valued employee if you're not, if you're missing some of that. But it also becomes, is the juice worth the squeeze? So if you're talking about CM Punk, I don't care how anyone wants to flavor this up. I don't know what they paid him. I heard $6 million. And whoever's out there who will be writing on this when you guys put it on the audio or whatever, no, it was this. I don't know what it was. But here's the deal. CM Punk, to me, for AEW, was their biggest star, but he did not move the needle enough for what their expectation was, at least in my opinion. And to me, CM Punk's antics, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And that's my point as being a manager. If CM Punk could have behaved like John Cena, who knows what he could have done? Maybe, I don't know, because he really wasn't moving the needle. And the guy has proven to be a discontent his entire career. Okay? So, as an employee and as being a manager, if you're not the complete package, you're not worth it to me. You know? Hulk Hogan was the complete package. Yeah, did he have problem? Look, you fight with your boss. I get it. It happens. This is life. We all fight with each other. But in the end, Hulk always knew who was feeding the train. He understood that, right? Shawn always knew he was feeding the train. Once Shawn wasn't worth the money anymore. See, people always like, oh, Shawn just act like Punk and Vince dealt with it. Because at the time, he was worth it. But when WCW closed and Shawn wasn't drawing what he was supposedly drawing, what did Vince tell him to do? Take a walk. You're not worth it to me anymore. Get out. That's all I got to say about it anyway.
Well, Vince was more concerned about doing business and making friends, which is the big difference between him and Tony Khan.
Yeah, Benny, you talked about. But I thought it was interesting. Benny said they give Punk enough slack. Probably gives everybody too much slack. Let's think back on what started this whole thing originally with Punk. Was Adam Page talking shit live on the air to Punk? Okay, that had to be squashed right away. Instead, it gets even worse. And then they have the giant scrum at the press conference after the show about a year ago, whatever it was. Poor CM Punk's dog gets his teeth kicked in or some shit. I mean, you didn't handle it then. You didn't pay to shut up, pay in portion, shut your mouth. Instead, we had that. Then we had the recent thing with Punk. He gave everybody over there much slack, period. He lets the boys run the asylum. That's all there is to it. Too much slack across the board.
Yeah, Mike, you were talking about leadership. I mean, let's be honest. That was not just and no. I mean, I don't want to disrespect Adam Page. He came from he came from our school that's close to the program. But he went into business for himself. The BS stories that were spread about Punk wanting Colt Cabana fired, which even Dave Meltzer's rolled back and admitted that was crap. So you get this narrative. This is the build. This isn't just like, oh, I went into business for myself. This was the build to the main event of what was going to be the biggest at the time, the biggest pay-per-view in company history. First pay-per-view with $1 million plus gate. And he goes into business for himself. I don't care if you're the champion. If that was, let's say, you mentioned Shawn. That was Shawn and Brett, or something where you're building and you're not quite at the Rock Austin level where I'll let it slide this time. McMahon probably either tells him you're dropping the belt and then you're fired, or he fires him as he's walking through the curtain, and we'll figure something else out for my pay-per-view. I'm not above saying, I hate to use the example, but Bash at the Beach style, Vince Russo coming out and saying Hogan's gone, we're going to have a new main event because I'm done working with this POS. The fact that went nowhere, nothing happened, literally no punishments, no, as far as we can tell, it wasn't even discussed. It just kind of something else to fester in the back of Punk's mind, and more just kept building. And I think that goes to the leadership that you were talking about.
Well, Dan, it goes deeper than that, right? So AEW kind of was built as the alternative, right? And what the fans wanted. We want to see more action. We want to see less mic work. Part of it was, I'm sick of WWE scripted interviews or whatever they're doing. Here's the problem. You, Pharaoh, Benny, myself, we don't know better than Vince McMahon. If Vince McMahon at some point decided you will do scripted, you will say it as my writers wrote it for you, right? There's a reason. Because he was not going to allow his billions of dollars, which he just got paid for, to be ruined by a guy like Page, right, who decides to go into business for himself. In fact, I would say you could go further than that and say that if you did something like that, I can guarantee it's in the contract that they're going to sue you. You go off script, they're going to sue you. So everything you've been paid throughout your career will be gone because we're going to sue you. There's rules to follow. And that's why. So Tony Khan wanted to appease, Johnny Joe out there. And this is what he got, because he thought giving the 600,000, the 900,000 fans who were crying what they wanted was the right way to go. And what it did was eat his company from inside out. I purely believe Collision will not make it till December. I guarantee that show will be canceled.
I agree. It's very clear he can't have two shows. He's trying to do Raw and SmackDown, and those shows are failing.
Well, I think it's worth noting, too, one of the, I don't want to say stories, but one of the things that kind of came to the light when CM Punk's contract was terminated is he was working under two contracts at the time. He had a wrestling contract, and he was contracted as the lead producer / creative director of Collision. That was his show. The story we'll get to later where Jack Perry wanted to do the spot with the real glass, and the doctors went to Punk and were like, hey, he's not listening to us. You go tell him no. That's why Punk was in that position, because that was his show. And now you've got Dynamite and what's going to end up being two Rampages. Whether Collision, and maybe they give it to Bryan Danielson, or whether they bring in somebody else to try and make it different. It's only going to be one or the other, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how that boils down. But I kind of want to expand a little bit too on, we talked about the leadership, where Pharaoh mentioned the scrum, and obviously the big blow up there. CM Punk, he had just won the title. He knew he was hurt. I think it was a torn tricep. Yeah. So I mean, he knew. That's months, 5-6 months surgery, maybe. So he knew. He's like, I'm hurt. I'll be gone. I'll probably never have another chance to publicly address all this. So he laid it all out there like it was, and then the fight in the back. What do you guys think of Tony Khan just pretty much sitting there with his, for lack of a better description, with his thumb up his ass, other than the occasional nodding, like, yeah, what Punk is saying is true? He didn't stop it. He didn't interject. He didn't even appear like it was genuinely. He
apologized a couple of times like a whiny shit.
Yeah, there you go. What do you guys think of that?
I'll have to jump in here because Farrell's doing the Tourette's.
Let's do like a Tourette's to English for Jimmy.
What did I think of that? I thought that was the start. I think that was the start of it all, right? I think that's where you started to see the real holes in Tony Khan's game and his leadership, right? I just think it was embarrassing. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not a Tony Khan guy, but I also put ownership on the wrestlers. Like, who is CM Punk? This guy just paid you a bunch of money. He brought you back. He adores you. He's a huge fan. And then you go out of your way to embarrass him and his company. I mean, where's the respect there? I mean, where's the respect from the wrestlers towards the people that are paying them? So it's like when we sit there and people defend the wrestlers and go, oh, they got screwed here, or they don't get health insurance, or they don't get what this is a perfect example of they prove what they really are. I'm sorry. It's like you spit on the guy who's feeding your family. And that whole crew does it all the time. So, it's like, why feel bad for them? They don't feel bad. They don't even feel bad for a millionaire. Do you think they really feel bad for the fans? I'm sorry. I'm not a Tony Khan guy, but I also think that CM Punk humiliated him there. He didn't humiliate the EVPs. They could have cared less. They didn't care what CM Punk had to say, whatever. He embarrassed the owner of the company, and forever he will never be taken seriously again, no matter what he tries. I think I asked Farrell the other week, by him firing CM Punk, did he get respect in the locker room? And Farrell's like, hell no. They could give a shit. They don't care.
No, so, Punk came across as an arrogant prick, and Tony Khan came up as the poster boy for Vagisil. I mean, nobody won there.
Jesus.
The Vagisil.
We need subtitles for Jimmy. Just put like oi.
Yeah, I apologize, folks. One of our guests is having technical issues, but to kind of bounce that, yes, I agree. I mean, obviously, I wanted to wear something appropriate for the occasion. I agree. The entire scrum was handled poorly, but I also think it boils down to you had to have known what you were getting, and if you didn't, then that's a failure on Tony Khan's side as well. CM Punk has always had the reputation. He takes zero shit. He doesn't give a crap what anyone thinks. His bosses, his friends, his family, he'll tell it like it is or like he thinks it is, and that's it. They knew what they were getting when they brought him in. And you see that with some of the jabs, and they kind of poke the bear a little bit. So I think if you're going to throw your hands up and be like, oh my God, I didn't know that it was going to end like this, then that's a failure on Tony Khan's part of leadership, because he should have known what he was getting when he brought Punk in. And he also should have known, I've got some guys in the back, which if you look at it, like you said, it was a split. I mean, you look at some of the people that have spoken out since Punk left, and they've been nothing but grateful. A lot of the younger talent, like a Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricky Starks and the Acclaimed. And I remember watching an interview with Jade Cargill where she said that they were going to do a no DQ match, and Punk was the one that went out of his way to work with her, because she was green, as Jim Cornette says, greener than a pepper tree. No one had ever worked with her before on how to use a weapon. She had no idea how to do chair shots. Punk was the one that went in and was like, hey, on my time, come on. And he worked with the women on how to do weapon spots. And, he's worked with the young guys. When he came in, Darby Allin and all that, like the young talent that could learn from him, the ones that weren't in that elite inner circle, 99.9% positive praise for the guy. It was just that one click, the Bucks and Page and Perry and their little circle, that seemed to have an issue with him. And I'm wondering if that's a locker room issue that, like you said, that never got cut, or was it just two personalities that never met?
We should go back to Farrell's point, right? So whenever you lead, no matter what you do, forget about wrestling, whatever, sports, your job, you have key people, right, that you, as a leader, that you're going to weigh on or you're going to go to, right? Your quarterback, your right tackle. I think Khan made the mistake of not making a decision who his quarterback and right tackle was. So if it was Page, he should have stood by Page. If it was Punk, he should have squashed Page the minute Page opened his mouth. He should have, I think, now to defend Punk, back to that scrum, that if Khan would have done that, maybe that whole thing doesn't happen. maybe he lost respect for Khan because Khan couldn't make a decision. You know, Khan, you know, you talk about Kay Cargill, right? Cahill, is that how you say it?
Jade Cargill, yeah.
Cargill, yeah. To me, she's got it all. Okay, she's not a good wrestler, I get it. But you get around that. She's got it. Like, they could have done something, but they just, you know, the whole Goldberg thing, her coming in, like they should have worked a little more on her mic skills, let her just squash the hell out of every woman. And she could have, you know, she's got the look. She had what it took. You talk about Hobbs, another guy, could have done something with him. He made so many match and bookings mistakes too that he left himself in a corner. So many guys lost that should have gone further. He blew it. I think it goes back. You can't be everything. Not everybody could be Vince McMahon. You can't be the booker and the owner and everything else. You know, give someone your vision, tell them what you want, and then have them execute for you. Because he blew it in so many different ways. You know, we were talking about earlier. I want to just go back to that about things that, you know, Benny was talking about, you know, the Tanaka San Martino match. Do you know, for me personally, at my age now, I give a lot of credit to the WWE at this point because there have been must-see things that have gone on recently. Like Roman Reigns matches, I love. There's a match that's going to go on tonight after this show. The Becky Lynch match, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I want to see that match. I'm sorry. I'm totally hooked to see those two go at it. So I don't know, man. Maybe it's just that people that don't belong in, like, don't know wrestling and don't have a background in it, don't belong in it, I guess. I don't know.
What do you think, Pharaoh? You seem to be reconnected.
Are you sure? Because I don't know what happened before. I could hear you guys.
Oh, no,
I could see you guys. All of a
crystal
sudden, you
clear,
guys
yeah.
told me I sounded like a Cylon Raider. Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're coming through good for me.
All right, cool. So let me ask you guys a question. What the fuck are we talking about? I just missed everything. What are we doing?
Cliff's Notes version. We were talking about the the failure of Tony Khan as a leader, and
Right.
the second
Right.
part of that being the clique of the locker room, because you have your little all elite
Right.
circle, your Bucks and Omega and Jericho,
Right.
and then you've got your
Right.
Hobbs and
Right.
you know, all your young guys that had nothing, you know, Sting and even some of the veterans like Billy Gunn and Sting and
Right.
Big Show Paul White, that all had, you know, positive things to say.
Right.
Do you think it's a failure of leadership that your locker room was so clicked? And do you think it was just, like, to Mike's point, that Tony Khan is proving the Herb Abrams mentality of money and fandom doesn't equal ability to run wrestling?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's a good mix. Too much of a fan. You're too much of a fan. You know, it's like when when the Coke dealer don't use stuff. You run your business. Don't snip it. You know, it's the same concept. Quite honestly, Tony Khan gets high on wrestling as a fan, and he can't see the business end of it. This makes me tired of it. Fire Jack Pack, period. Man, I'll see him in private with him. So fuck down, you pain in the ass. He did. Hit me for himself. I put it all, and he did. And when I said originally before I got a break, Ben and Jet logo there, Tony Khan was Rich Kotite. That was a Rich Kotite. You just gonna pull that shit next to Bill Parcells?
I heard Rich Kotite. That's a name from the past.
Well,
that was a dark period for Jets fans.
Did I disappear again?
You broke up a little bit, but don't worry. All your swear words came through perfectly clear.
Well, at least I have the consistency of not saying, though, that it was a Kotite, and if he was a Parcells, that crap ain't happening.
Right. Well, that's kind of leads into what I'm going to present a scenario here, and I presented this on Facebook. But just imagine that it's WrestleMania 14. Scotty 2 Hotties in the opening match, and Undertaker gets wind of the fact that Scotty wants to use real glass in a spot during his match, and he tells him, "You better not do it." So Scotty goes out, looks right in the camera, and says, "This is real glass, Crimea River." So then he goes backstage after the match and gets fucking blasted by the Undertaker. Now, do you see Vince McMahon firing Undertaker and then issuing a statement that Vince was in fear for his life? This is why AEW will never be WWE.
Right. And what's even funnier is what do you mean you were afraid for your life? The scrum a year ago where the dog got his teeth kicked in? That was much worse than this scrum. So you didn't fear for your life a year ago, Tony?
But you fire CM Punk for a backstage altercation. And I really haven't watched their show, but my understanding is there's like 7 or 8 backstage altercations every week. So you're firing somebody for something that happens like 7 times a week?
This goes back to writing, right? If you're going to come out in public, someone's got to write for you. And I guarantee if someone was writing for him, they would say, you cannot say you in fear for your life because you're going to show that you're not a leader. These are the words you're going to use. He went out thinking he was going to get the public's, sympathy, right? That, oh, poor Tony Khan, CM Punk scared him. CM Punk's a big old bad wrestler, and he was going to hurt Tony Khan. I really don't know, honestly, how this guy's running a business because every move he makes is wrong. It's wrong.
Jim Cornette called him Richie Rich, and I think it's a pretty good analogy. He's playing with daddy's money.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that he's, like he said, I feared for my life, and not just his life, the safety of the people, the production staff backstage. Like CM Punk was back there threatening an office shooting or waving around a chainsaw, like he was going to hurt multiple people. I think it kind of exposed Tony Khan as the titty baby rich boy. CM Punk had finally had enough. Maybe he flipped the table and knocked over some monitors. Who knows? But this is clearly the first time in his life that Tony Khan has ever actually been yelled at, and he crumpled like a wet napkin. Oh my God, I feared for my life. Why? Because a wrestler got mad at you? Is there any way that Tony Khan genuinely believes in his mind that CM Punk was a threat to the safety of the grips and the production crew and the guy running catering?
But you know what, Dan? The better play would have been that. He should have said, I cannot have a hostile work environment. I've got producers back here. I've got people that are afraid to do their jobs because they don't want to offend someone. I can't have that back there. I think the general public could have understood that more than him saying, I'm in fear for my life. CM Punk was going to kill me, right? Because at that point, it's a joke, right? I mean, Tony Khan's about the only guy CM Punk could really beat up in real life. So, again, the play should have been, I'm here to protect the common man, right? I'm trying to protect the common man against this big old mean wrestler. I think the general public would have understood that more. I think I would have said, yeah, okay, that makes a little more sense. You know what I mean? People shouldn't have to come to work and be afraid that CM Punk's going to get mad at them and yell at them, right?
I agree.
I can't get over, and I never will get over, and it stays in my head to this day, the hug that Tony Khan gave Cesaro when he signed him. He was hugging him like his childhood Munchie toy. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is not a guy who should be running this business.
Well, I think it's worth noting, too, that Tony Khan has said in interviews that the name Dynamite came from his fantasy wrestling league that he would run on his computer with his friends when he was a teenager. That, the back when the text-based games were real big. Like, I hate to use the, to keep mentioning him because we've talked about him, I think mentioned him 3 or 4 times already, but Jim Cornette described Tony Khan as a rich kid playing with his action figures. He's the one banging the stars together. And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But I want to talk back to money. And you both agreed, Monty and the Pharaoh, you both agreed that Collision will most likely not survive the year. Now, it did bounce back a little bit, but the first Collision following the release of CM Punk was the lowest rated Collision by far. The ratings showed 89,000 people turned off the TV while Tony Khan was saying that CM Punk is gone. Like, oh, this isn't, work. This is real. I'm done. And for the first time in the show's history, the numbers dropped. It's never set the world on fire. Between Collision, Rampage, and Dynamite combined, they're lucky to get 1.5 million, 2 million views a week. But Collision was always the show. It started at 4 or 5, somewhere between 450 to 750,000, and it ended at 450 to 750,000. This show dropped off the cliff. And if CM Punk was their number one merch seller, he was the consistently the biggest rating draws in the segments he was on. He headlined 4 of their 6 biggest pay-per-views in history. From a purely money standpoint, well, I mean, I don't expect AEW to fold, but how do they recover from such a crippling loss as far as just finance and ratings?
You want the answer? And they should have pulled the trigger months ago. Go sign Goldberg. Throw a whole bunch of money at him. Have him there. As ridiculous as some people probably go, are you kidding me right now? That's the guy, right? Because who else are you going to get? Who are you going to bring in that people are going to go, oh my God, I need him, right? There's no one there. Goldberg, let me tell you something. If Goldberg's on Collision, I might tune in. You know what? Because it's Goldberg.
It's an attraction.
My opinion.
Right.
My opinion.
But you'll notice that, Cody came back. And the flow of wrestlers from WWE to AEW, it's kind of dropped off to nothing, right? They're not going there anymore.
Well, because the WWE casted all these guys away. Daniel Bryan, goodbye. You don't want to be here. We don't really want to sign you anyway. Good luck. We love you. You did great for us. Move on. They got rid of who they wanted to get rid of.
Right.
Right. I got to give AEW one thing, and I seriously mean that. Thank God they didn't get Bray Wyatt, because if this would have happened and everything that went down with Bray Wyatt, forget about it. AEW is the Jets of wrestling. You know what I mean? It's like no matter what they touch, it turns to crap.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where they really messed up too. The biggest thing that they messed up of all. How did Vince really win the war? Back in the day, he won the war because he stared at himself in the mirror, looked at his own talent, and turned his own talent into household names. His own talent. The problem with them is that they overestimated, and I think Mike will agree with me on this one. Tony Khan, when he started this company, overestimated the household name impact probability of guys like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks. These were his guys.
Right.
These were not. You understand? None of these guys turned out to be what he needed to become a WrestleMania type of situation for his company, to have a truly great, successful company. He didn't have it. So what did he do? He went out and he got CM Punk. He did the WCW thing. It's so obvious what's going on here. It's just going to lead to disaster. The only prayer he has is just to bring someone in that knows something about this business and create new stars from within. But you know something? I feel like he's already out of time. This feels like WCW.
It's not to be fair, Farrow. It's not a fair fight. You're talking about a organization that's been around for 50 some odd years against a company that's been 4 years. But here's the telling point to back you up exactly what you're saying. When everybody was talking about the Wednesday night wars and how AEW supposedly destroyed NXT and put them in their place, you had established stars against up-and-comers. But guess what?
Right.
Those up-and-comers now are stars. And now they're bypassing, right? So the turtle wins the race. I mean,
you know who I love? Grayson Waller. Oh my. How great is Grayson Waller? Yeah. I don't see them doing stuff like that over there.
Even look at the current, like just the current product right now, Raw and SmackDown. I mean, you mentioned Grayson Waller, Austin Theory. You've got some, especially the women's division with some of the big NXT call-ups they've had. You've got
match tonight.
I was just at Raw. Now, mind you, I didn't watch Raw as faithfully as I did SmackDown because 3 hours, 2 hours, Fox is easier watching USA Network. But I was at Raw, friends, good time, and I realized something. You had Cody and Rhea Ripley and the Judgment Day, and you had, it's just so much talent. This young talent. most of the card was under the age of 30 or somewhere in that 25 to 35 spot. And of course, in wrestling, as we've seen from your Cena and your AJ Styles, 40 is the new 30. It's not unheard of for someone to wrestle until they're 50 now and still be good.
Right. Yep.
So, I look at this, is there anyone who looks at WWE and doesn't think their future is secured as far as main stars down the road? I look at AEW and I look at their big names, like I see, an MJF or someone like we talked about, like a Ricky Starks or a Powerhouse Hobbs or somebody that I could see doing something with. I see 90% of their young talent that's worth anything in 5 years is on Raw or SmackDown.
I agree.
Because if I'm an MJF and even if I'm best friends with everybody, you can't know anything about wrestling and not see the bigger, better opportunity is on the other side of the fence. So what do you guys think about that? This idea that the future is secured in the WWE, AEW's future, who is their next big star if some of their good young talent leaves in the next year or two?
Well,
I agree with
question, that. Dan, for you to answer. If AEW is to close, is the WWE going to take any of their stars?
I think you have, and Benny, I want your thoughts on this too. I think if AEW goes out of business, let's say WCW style, and the WWE owns the contracts and can do whatever they want, you have someone like an MJF, I think they could do something with. I think a Wardlow, Powerhouse Hobbs, they would work in the WWE style. But there is a lot of regular presentation on AEW programming, like their announce team, for example. I personally absolutely, and I hear he's a good man, so I don't want to criticize the person, but Excalibur is probably the worst wrestling announcer I have ever heard, and that includes watching Michael Cole twice.
I was going to just say, what about Michael Cole?
Wait a minute. We got to stop right there. Dan, you know how much I adore your guys' show, and you guys have beat up Michael Cole from day one when I've been listening to you. At what point are you going to turn back and say Michael Cole is one of the greatest wrestling announcers of all time?
Hey, give credit where credit is due. Benny and I have both said when Vince came out of the ear and when he was working with Pat McAfee, and you could tell, because let's be honest, Michael Cole's not that good of an actor. You could tell he genuinely loved what he was doing, and there was that new life. When Michael Cole is allowed to enjoy what he's doing and do his thing, he's phenomenal. But when you have the clips where Kevin Owens is coming off the Hell in a Cell and Michael Cole is literally reading from a script in the background, oh my God, Kevin Owens just fell, and it sounds so manufactured. That's no one does it worse than him. When he's at his best, he's great. When he's in the mold of Vince is in your ear, you got to stick to the bullet points and talk about $9.99 WWE Network and sponsored by Sprite every 10 minutes, he's terrible. Whereas Excalibur could read Shakespeare and I wouldn't want to hear what he had to say. It's just his voice, the mannerisms, and you can tell when you listen to a Tony Schiavone or a Jim Ross, they're when they want to, they're there, but sometimes they're phoning it in because whatever.
And let's be honest, and I really mean this. This is not a joke. You should never have an announcer who wears a mask, and I mean that.
I agree.
It's stupid. It's dumb.
Yeah,
it's a dumb gimmick, and it's bad.
Yeah.
And to be honest about Tony Schiavone, I always thought he was okay. I thought he was more of a Mean Gene type of guy. I never felt that he was a great play-by-play guy. So, again, you know what? That's another great point, guys, is that their announcing team is subpar. And I think that also hurts their product.
I'll use a baseball analogy because I haven't used one all show.
Benny, you got to get your baseball reference in. Show's almost over.
WWE is the New York Yankees and AEW is Scranton Wilkes-Barre.
There you go.
I would like to correct.
I do have a question for you guys.
Wow.
I want Dan and Benny.
You do not agree, Jimmy? Or?
What's that?
No, Jimmy said wow, and wow, and he disagrees, or?
Well, I just want to.
No, I don't disagree. I just didn't realize that they were all the way down at the Scranton Wilkes-Barre situation. I thought you were going to call them the Padres or something. They wound up in the minor leagues completely. Wow.
Benny, I love you. I love you to death, but let's be honest. In today's product, AEW is the Yankees and WWE is the rest of the AL East. That's kind of where we're at right now.
I'm
you're
I'm
probably
being
Oh, wait a
I'm being
minute.
historical here.
Wait
All right,
a minute.
Here's the question.
That was
to all
mean.
three of you. This is the Monty question of the day, and I hate to jump on your show and say this, but I want you guys have the book. I want individual answers. It's 9/11, right? It's yesterday. It's Monday Night Raw. You've got the book. Yeah. Everybody knows Selena Vega's father died at 9/11, and she made a promise that she was going to win the championship for him. They're both huge wrestling fans. Do you let Selena Vega defeat Rhea Ripley on 9/11 for one of, I guess, could be one of the greatest all-time moments? Go ahead.
What do you think, Benny?
I don't think it would do any harm. I mean, it wouldn't make Rhea's going to recover from that. She could take the loss, and it would. I mean, it would do everything for Selena, and it would. I don't think it would hurt Rhea, so I would say yes.
I mean, they had their chance before. Last time they had a 9/11 show, they took flack because Zelina Vega was there. She posted on social media like, in New York, ready to perform, but Memorial, and she wasn't even on the card. Like, they kept her in catering for the show. I give credit. You always want me to say something positive about Vince McMahon. The speech he made at the SmackDown, which was the first public venue event following 9/11, when he came out, and it was clearly off script. It was from the heart. I give Vince McMahon credit because he kind of, not just the fans, but the world, like, hey, look, we're not afraid, let wrestling lead the charge. The Rock and the crew he had back then. I give him credit. Since then, I think they've lost some opportunities, but I'd be hard pressed because I like Zelina Vega as a talent, but the way she's been presented, especially with the LW kind of being the female hand of the LWO recently, I even for a feel good moment, I just don't think she's a believable challenger to the way they've booked Rhea Ripley. If you're going to have her win, maybe not the title, I think you could do a multi-man match where she pins Rhea Ripley or overcomes something. But if it was me, sure. I'm a sucker for the feel good moments, and I was there, so I would have loved to have been in the crowd when that happened. But from a purely scripted standpoint, even for 9/11, I don't think it would have made any sense.
Farrell?
And I don't think I would have been. I don't think so. Especially out of the blue. I mean, number one, you got to have a great for it. That's a great story. But Mike is thing as a potential condition on here. It's a great story. But don't build it up. First of all, you can do it right, but you'd have to build her up to 9/11. Kind of about it. It's not really about field pro wrestling stories. Not to me, And what is your plan with her afterwards? Is she going to hold that belt for a while? Are you turning into a Guerrero level? Her abilities and her background and everything like that? Is that what you want to do with her? So I would have a whole bunch of questions. I would be wanting to be asked this question about the 9/11 booking 2 months in advance, if you understand what I'm saying, before I make that decision about the 9/11 booking itself. Honestly, I think that it would hurt Rhea. Rhea is really on her way to becoming the greatest powerhouse female wrestler in the history of the business if she's not already there. So I'm not sure that a quick feel-good moment would be the right move.
Personally, I think it could be an iconic moment, but I agree with Jimmy and Dan. You can't. Wins and losses count. Wins and losses count.
They
as
do.
Stupid as this sounds,
They do count.
You damage Rhea's character. Even if you do the old oops, I tripped and she got a lucky pin, whatever the case is,
right?
You do damage the character.
Yeah.
And the way, the way Judgment Day's running right now, it could have been a great moment that you could have had forever. But the reality of it is Rhea Ripley is one of your future stars that, again, here's my man cave. I've only got certain wrestlers. I changed it to a wrestling man cave. I got a lot of other stuff, but there's only certain wrestlers on this wall that I feel deserve it. And some you might laugh and go, they don't. but some you do. And I'm very close to putting Rhea up on my wall at this point.
She should be on your wall. And you know, some wins and losses do matter. One of my all-time favorites, Nakamura, to this day, is still from Jinder Mahal loss.
You know,
He's a wonderful W. He's had a wonderful WWE career in everything.
No, again, apologize for the technical issue, but he's right. That was the first thought that I had in my head when you talked about wins, losses, was the image of, and as much I'll admit I'm a huge fan, probably more than most people, just because I've always had a soft spot for him. But when Jinder Mahal won the title and defended it successfully for months, both Randy Orton and Shinsuke Nakamura came out of that worse for wear. Randy Orton, he kind of worked his way back up. Shinsuke never fully recovered to being a main event threat from that loss. Now, I'm not saying I don't think if Rhea Ripley had lost clean to Zelina Vega, even if it was a oops, I tripped or surprise roll up or something, I don't think she would have been off kilter. But I think it would have been one of those moments, kind of like that. Look at how long it took to rebuild her from her loss at Mania to Charlotte Flair. For the she's going to defend the NXT title, beat Charlotte, give the title to NXT, be on the main roster, it writes itself. She loses. It took her almost a year to be considered relevant again. Same thing with Asuka. The Kurt Charlotte cashing in her Charlotte in the Bank contract and getting her unnecessary title shots. But I think it's important as we wrap up here, guys. Benny, last question to you was the point you had brought up, and I'm going to ask all three of you, and I'll start with you, Benny. So we'll go back to where we started. Where does CM Punk go from here? Does he WWE? Does he go back to AEW eventually? Never say never wrestling. Is he, to quote Cornette, thank you, fuck you, bye? Like, where does he go from here?
That's a tough one, man. Because I do not see him going back to AEW. I could see him taking his ball and going home, but does he really want to end his career on such a low point? So I could see him going back to WWE.
What about you, Mike?
I think CM Punk's got a choice. He can go to the abyss and be the guy that could have been. Because when you look, we get a lot of guys in the studio, right? They're older, right? And you could see some regrets, right? In any career that you have. So he has a choice. CM Punk could have been, or he has a choice to go to the WWE, do the job to Roman Reigns and whoever else they got coming on, make a big splash, and kind of recover from all this. Because think about it. He comes back, you put him in main event with Roman Reigns at Royal Rumble or something like to that effect. It rights all the wrongs. And it would garner so much attention, it would be unbelievable. But unfortunately, I think Phil Brooks and CM Punk are the same person. And I think both of them can't get along, have to have it their way. And in the end, when CM Punk is 64 years old and 65 years old or 70, he looks back at his career, he's going to go, you know what? I had a great career. Could have did so much more, and I blew it.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like we're still having some technical issues on Pharaoh's side. I don't want to end with on that note, but I will say, this is my interjection here. Nick Khan was asked this came out today as the discussions for the Endeavor deal. They rang the bell on the stock market. Endeavor now owns WWE. It was one of those textbook corporate answer non-answers. It was, we respect CM Punk. We value what he did here. He went to the UFC, win, lose, or draw. That took courage. The locker room loves him. It wasn't a no. It wasn't a yes. And I think that is incredibly telling, that if it was Vince is in his ear, Endeavor's in his ear, absolutely effing not, we're not signing that guy, he would have said that. Or at least it would have been more negative. The fact that it's, what are the chances of CM Punk coming back to the WWE? Well, we love him. He's great. We value everything he did here. So that's not a no, but that's certainly more to the yes side. And I think it's also telling, Mike, you talked about big moments. Survivor Series is in Chicago. Is that when you pull the trigger? Assuming that, because even a standard no compete clause would be over by then.
Survivor Series, absolutely. And you put him instantly in a main event. You don't futz around, right? You don't have him wrestle a couple of guys, have a little mini feud before he gets there. Get him there before Cody Rhodes. Get him there against Reigns. Obviously, you got to have Reigns go over on him, which is fine.
Right.
But again, he rights all the wrongs. And think about it afterwards. Cody wins the title. CM Punk could go after Cody, after Seth Rollins, or whoever's holding the championship. There's so much in the future that CM Punk can recover from, and that could draw big money and be must watch for fans like ourselves. So I hope that CM Punk rethinks himself, returns back to the WWE, and finishes his career strong like Shawn Michaels. Can I say one last thing?
Absolutely. I was about to do my final thought circle, so you can go first. What are you thinking, Mike?
I want to say what an honor it is to be on the Dan and Benny show. I discovered you guys just from your previous show that you were on, and when you guys joined together, I always did enjoy both your commentaries. And when I started listening to your show, I always felt how incredible and how lucky wrestling fans are to have a show like you guys have. You're different. You teach with the people that you have on. You make people realize that they don't know nearly or a 1/100th of what's out there to learn. And you guys are entertaining. And it's an honor to have you on our channel. It's an honor to be a wrestling fan and be able to listen to you guys every week. And it was an honor to be on your show today. I just wanted to be able to say that.
Thank you. That's great.
That's high praise. I appreciate it. Benny, final thoughts to you?
Well, I heard that Joe Namath is on his way to the Jets practice facility. So
I'll take him. Well, I do want to say one thing. On Sunday, 11 a.m., well, on Friday, we've got Manny Fernandez back in at 6:30.
Oh, nice.
And at 7:30, Brett Azar. We'll be discussing with Manny Fernandez. Ever since he's been on the show, a lot of problems about his valor and where he actually stood during Vietnam, and we're going to approach that again. And then at Sunday at 11 a.m., we have the first interview with Barry Windham since his heart attack and since the passing of Wyndham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt. So it should be a pretty emotional show. And of course, I don't know where Barry is on your list. To me, he's in my top 10 greatest wrestlers of all time. I've always loved Barry Windham. More in the NWA, obviously. He never really got off in the WWF, but he's one of the guys maybe go to the NWA. So I just want to remind fans that this weekend, Friday, Sunday, you got some incredible shows coming up.
Barry Windham was like one of the top 3 in the 80s.
Absolutely.
He was as good as it got.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we appreciate you guys have great stuff. I know as a veteran myself, your Manny Fernandez stuff that you've done, and you guys did a few months ago kind of a little discussion, maybe not a whole show, but like a discussion on this story about Sergeant Slaughter and whether, the importance of playing a character where the stolen valor line gets blurred as a character. And like I said, as a veteran myself, I respect and like that kind of stuff. So you guys are always great content. And unfortunately, like I said, we had some technical difficulties today with Jimmy, so we lost to Pharaoh. Mike, thank you so much for being here. Dan and Benny in the Ring, anywhere podcasts can be listened to. Our friends on Facebook, Monty and the Pharaoh, we can be found on their channel. Great stuff. Look them up. I'm Dan Sebastiano for Mike, Monty, and the Pharaoh for the original Long Island Iced Bee. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you next time we're in the ring.